Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Moving from the systems approach and analysis of the cybernetics dimension to the study of socio-technical systems and the approach of socio-technical systems to the understanding of organization and human aspects of management of business engineering should really be a short step. Also, the word socio-technical systems has been around for so long that it is simpler to communicate, but perhaps to that extent made a little complex to understand, because people may assume they know it all when they may not actually be in full control of the implications of socio-technical systems to organization theory and practice or to human resources management. Well, at least we can try. We can begin with some definitions. It is always soulful to look at definitions, because once you look at definitions, then you can evoke the power of authority to say, look, it has been said before. And at a certain level of learning, quoting well established names is a good principle of conveying a point. And in this presentation, because of the much weather beaten nature of the subject, I intend to use that approach to a certain extent to convey the point better. To understand socio-technical systems, it is important to understand technology and organization structure, and any study of technology and organization structure would require recognition of some contributors from John Woodward, who carried out one of the most influential studies to discover whether principles of organizations laid down by an expanding body of management theory correlates with business success when put into practice, a very fundamental dilemma. Do principles of organizations as understood and practiced have a correlation with business success? It is something like asking such a fundamental question that the whole edifice could be pulled down if it was proved wrong. Well, John Woodward's studies themselves gave the answer to a certain extent. The socio-technical systems theory evolved from the field work of researchers of Tavistock Institute of Human Relations. Developing of methods for systematic observation of human behavior or organizations was attempted so as to solve social problems. What were the social problems of the organizations, and what was the field work of researchers from this institute, which was devoted to human relations, but made its mark more by looking at the technological variable affecting human relations. The problems which they tried to tackle was, in the service department, does piecewise pay dividends vis-a-vis fixed pay, or does fixed pay produce better performance as compared to piecewise. There were other questions. Does showing no concern for the worker's interest yield results, or the opposite of it? Does showing concern to workers' interest yield results? Managers and workers showed lack of trust on each other. Now, is lack of trust more conducive to work performance, or creation of trust is more conducive to work performance? Researchers suggested a whole range of possibilities in interrelationships, and a lot of effort was done for morale building. We will look into some of this as we go along. The Tavistock research, the basic principle was there are social implications for every implementation of change. Now, this was a basic principle on which Tavistock people researched. It was suggesting that you cannot have change without having social fallouts, especially technical change. Set up structure for intergroup communication to deal with these problems may need modification, because the structure which has been set up for intergroup communication may not be conducive to handling the issues of change. It also felt that one needs to have a company code governing the relationship between people at different levels, a protocol as it were, establishing social relationships and establishing some kind of unwritten, unstated understanding, which would total up to the same thing as saying that they were reluctant to state it in as many words, but relationships between people at different levels need to be governed through a code. Managers should be more responsive to organizational problems. Now, this is a truism. This can be said at any time, but that was not what the research was supposed to explore. The research was supposed to explore was the level of responsive to organizational problems, and some very interesting findings came. Basic problem is maintaining a structure and culture to cope with challenges of a changing society, again a truism. Healthy organization is one which is capable of tackling the problems in a realistic manner. Their researchers established that socio-technical systems are determined by the character of the organization and the character of the society. You will recall my presentation to you on organization design, where I gave you a circle, the 4 pillars, showed to you how organization structure was at the heart of it and what were the variables in the organization, and then I went on to explain to you different elements of systems theory. But here was a theory which said organizations are open systems. It felt organizations are open systems because the boundaries do not really apply when people enter the organization. They carry the culture of the job, OFF, and make it culture of 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 the job. Now, if the culture of the job is made culture of the job, then it can't be a closed system. Now, clearly you will notice that in management theory and practice, there are variations in positions propounders of theory take, which is essentially a way of saying that there is no such thing as a right theory or a wrong theory. The best theory is the theory which works. Very often you will be asked to take a position on these different theories depending upon your own life experiences. Be that as it may, socio-technical systems theory assumed that the environment for raw materials as inputs and the markets to absorb their outputs or products also make organizations an open system. Because organizations depend upon environment, and environment is from where raw materials come, and that is where output of products are absorbed. It consists of several subsystems to define internal processes. Now, again this is the perspective from socio-technical systems theory, and those of you who recall will find that there are other propositions which called organizations a closed system. Now, here is a schematic diagram of the organizational system which helps you to see the relationship and the interplay amongst various elements which affect an organization, which constitute an organization, and therefore are basic to determining whether the organization is a closed system or an open system. It is possible that in certain incarnations organizations are closed systems, and in certain incarnations organizations are open systems. Let us go around this in a clockwork mode, in a clockwise fashion. The technical systems consist of task requirements, knowledge, techniques, layout of facilities, machinery and equipment, information. These are the technical systems of an organization. The structural subsystems consists of tasks, workflows, work groups, authority, information flows, procedures. Now, in a manner of speaking, we have covered much of this. So, we know what the technical system connotates. We have also covered much of structural subsystems. We have looked at tasks, workflows, authority, and more. Then there are the psychological subsystems, which we have earlier on called the social subsystems. It consists of HR, attitudes, motivation, leadership, influence systems. And finally, there are goals and value subsystems of culture, philosophy, overall goals, individual goals. Now, just as earlier on we integrated the organizational variables and the social variables into management role and function, here we integrate these two boxes, if it can be so called, and these two clusters, if they can be so called, into the managerial subsystem. And what does the managerial subsystem then consists of? It consists of goal setting, which we have repeatedly maintained is where it goes back to. If you look at the creation of an organization, the reason death of an organization, planning, and planning follows from goal setting, assembling, managing resources, organizing activities, and implementation. Now, this is an organizational system. I will leave it there briefly, so that you can absorb the nuances of the same. To carry the subject matter forward, the technical subsystem has certain manifestations. Organization requires structuring and integration in human activities around a variety of technologies or various technologies. Every modern organization is influenced by the rapidly acceleration of technology in our society. It affects the types of inputs and the outputs from the subsystem, and thus the task accomplishment. Ways in which the organization adapts to the changing technology has a significant impact on other organizational subsystems. Now, in the presentation that I have made with you so far, it becomes necessary therefore, to get some definitions again right. The technical subsystem has a definition. The definition includes a mechanistic view. Remember, earlier on we have talked of the organismic view. Now, we talk of the mechanistic view. The mechanistic view determines the technical system. The mechanical means for production of goods and services and replacement of the human effort is the mechanistic view. Technology is far more than the machine and refers to standardized means for attaining a predetermined objective or result, thus converts spontaneous and unreflective behavior into behavior that is deliberate and rationalized and results in absolute efficiency in every field of human activity. And this is Jacques Ellul talking, one of the classical figures on organization management. In fact, some of you may have heard of his book, a semi-classic or perhaps a classic in its own right, The Changing Culture of a Work Factory. The definition which Jacques Ellul gave has to do with a proper understanding of technology, which is not confined to just the machine, but also standardized means for attaining a predetermined objective of results. So, the concept of the word technology has undergone expansion. A standardized means of attaining a predetermined objective. This converts spontaneous and unreflective behavior into behavior that is deliberate and rationalized and results in absolute efficiency in every field of human activity. To take it forward, one will have to grasp elements which are accelerating technology as well as the dangers of technology, and that together will put the discussion on socio-technical systems perspective in order. What are the factors accelerating technology? A gradual substitution of human effort by technology, because science and technology has become pervasive in modern society. And if nothing else, the concept of a robot which carries out most of the functions which require movement of the human body in the name of reducing drudgery is perhaps best answered by the phenomenal rise of fitness shops. So, on one side the chores are cut down to reduce human effort, and on the other side the expenditure is raised in the name of raising the levels and the standards of living. Everyday life is made more expensive by going to fitness shops to indulge in workouts and get exercise. One wonders whether there is not a case for creating a daily schedule which is a little more balanced, so that the gadgetry does not take over our lives as completely as it has in certain ways, and nor is it necessary to waste money working out what would have been a natural exercise of the body if we did not adopt so many labor saving devices. This has impacted the social structure and culture. Lifestyles have changed. The meaning of entertainment has changed. Even the set-top boxes undergo a change periodically. So, you go on spending. Electronics has taken over music in a manner unprecedented. In fact, one wonders how long a sitar or a tabla, or for that matter the humble harmonium itself, will prevent the onslaught of the electronic dissemination of the sound. Perhaps at the moment it sounds a comment in a lighter vein, but a possibility which cannot be ruled out totally. The relevant implication of that for the presentation which I am trying to share with you is that acceleration of technology has affected lifestyles. The socio-technical system is not just a matter of organizations anymore. The socio-technical systems is a matter of everyday experience. Automation has replaced human decision making even in the control phase. Effective utilization of technologies require the development of complex organizations, and this is the result which we can see in organizations of the coming in of the socio-technical systems in a large way. To put it quite simply, the socio-technical systems has generated a new breed of organizations, a new characterization of organizations. Organizations as we know today are not the organizations which existed 20 years ago. The technological variable has not only replaced the human variable in very many ways, but a lot of the thinking has become programmed up to a point where the human element had been almost declared redundant. Declaring it redundant has its own dangers, because newer possibilities beyond the boundary of the programmed set of options is ruled out. So, it drives out the humanistic and the social considerations. The total integration of man into technical systems, which is the socio-cultural structure, at times threatens the identity of the human resources in decision making. The challenges to there are changes in values and goals. As a result of this, there will be challenges to profit from its opportunities, and it has its own dangers. Interaction between the technical and the psychological systems is a determinant of relationships between technology and society. Therefore, socio-technical systems has a much wider connotation than what we found when we were taking a look at the design of organizations, and we were thinking of combining the social and the organizational variables through managerial role and behavior. This leads us to a very important thought. What is the classification of technical systems? The basis of primary schools, hospitals, unions is a classification which has often been used to draw its features from the technical system with which it operates, because the technical system is made its basis. Industrial organizations also have been classified on the basis of technical subsystems. Small batch, mass production and continuous processes all have been incorporated. But there is a definition of Thomson which comes to mind, which I think is worth noting in this context. It is of the view that long linked technology involves serial interdependence between various production units, which is perhaps best illustrated by fully automated assembly lines. This is the long linked technology. Then there is the mediating technology. The mediating technology involves joining of clients and customers otherwise independent. For example, banks may be joined. Banks may be joined with customers. Banks may be joined with corporates. It can also apply to post offices, and the list of mediating technologies are large. Then there is the intensive technology. The intensive technology deals with specific problems, and this manifests itself in R&D situations, in the way progressively hospitals are working. But the two primary dimensions to keep in mind is the extent of uniformity and non-uniformity that this brings. So, what is it that is being suggested here? What is being suggested here is that it is possible that the concept of socio-technical system itself being an evolving one affects the functioning of an organization in a dynamic mode, and the socio-technical systems which affected the organization 30 years ago is not the socio-technical system which is affecting the organization today. And therefore, there is a need for a continuous study of the impact of the socio-technical system endogenous to an organization on the characterization of the organization, and therefore, the distilling of the management principles which are best applied to the functioning of that organization. Be that as it may, it is obvious that the socio-technical systems approach has deeper roots and much wider ramifications than has been widely assumed to be so far. There are certain problems in adapting to the new technological component. It does not come easy. And what are the problems in the adopting of the new technological subsystems? In production processes, you find that whole set of specializations are being rendered redundant. It is not just a principle of redeployment. Redeployment can only take place when the fundamental technology involved remains broadly constant, and it is a question of repositioning. But there is no redeployment possible when a whole profession has been wiped out. Like for example, to go back to everyday illustration, the entire profession of technicians who used to send telegrams are today rendered obsolete a priori in India. Now, there is no question of redeploying them, it is a question of re-employing them. And anybody who has looked at recruitment selection knows that they will have to be given a set of skills to be employed, and those skills may be very different from the skills which earned their livelihood till not so long ago. So, the problems caused by technical subsystems and their evolving, growing, speeding character of change are tremendous in terms of organizational work, in terms of the social environment where the organizations are embedded, in terms of manpower planning, and it is difficult to evade the conclusion that socio-technical system needs to be comprehended and understood far better before one can hope to control it or work through it. Integrating and coordinating of different technologies within the organization system is also not easy. Integrating and coordinating the different types of technologies shows a need of awareness of a very wide spectrum. Considerable hands-on experience, without which the incoming of technology or that equipment in the organization may be of little value. Let me give you an illustration. No use of a computerized system, even in its simplest incarnation, that is email, is ever productive to the extent it was meant to be, if in the ultimate analysis the executive does not operate the computer himself, as I said, in its simplest incarnation of receiving emails and sending emails, but instead the entire emailing activity is handled by the secretary. And of course, one is not referring to the more sophisticated uses of computers, the desktop, the softwares, their need for aiding managerial decision making, those require even a higher level of competency. Because if after executive has just delegated the requirement of having emails being downloaded and that the printed version being put up to him, then you might not as well have moved on to the email era and stayed on with electronic typing and faxing. In either case, the investment in technology would have been far less, and therefore, you would have had more money to use, to spend, to invest elsewhere. Integrating and coordinating at different technologies within an organization therefore becomes a pressing need. Unlike everything else, organizations may also need a technological spectrum, but we do not want to open that debate here. We are trying to look at the socio-technical systems from the very limited perspective of trying to understand how the socio-technical system impacts the effectiveness parameter of an organization, and the socio-technical system is an integral part of work culture and the functioning of an organization. That there may be problems in the technical subsystem, that there may be problems of adoption of that technology, that it may require a very different type of skill formation are questions apart, but these are necessary concomitants of the analysis of the socio-technical systems. Let us look at the technical subsystems and let us look at the impact of the technical systems. If you have looked at the impact of the technical system and read through the slide, the debate which seemed to be around the corner has erupted. If traditionally the technological component was considered a closed system, then it did not have any dynamic interaction with the other systems. This is no longer so, an indication of the changing times. But if this was so, it would have led to an unrealistic and idealistic generalization. Actually, technology and other systems are independently related, at times beyond the organization. Take for example, the satellite and the beaming back of images to Earth that can be used for imaging. This can be used for various scientific purposes, I do not want to get into that. But the relationship of that technological system is not only at an interorganizational level. That technology transcends the organizational boundaries and are independently related. The three basic ways in which technology influences behavior, thoughts and other inputs are, as the diagram shows, human inputs required by an organization, gross features of organization structure and procedures, and determinants of individual, group and job designs. Therefore, the focus goes back to the human inputs, and we shall be paying more attention to it. Features of organization structure and procedures, which we have been studying at considerable detail, and determinants of individual and organizational job designs, which we have also studied in detail. So, what is the position we are now taking? The position we are now taking is, willy-nilly the socio-technical system affects and gets affected by human inputs, the structural and procedural aspects of the organization, the job designs and the social structure and norms of the organization, and indeed in turn is affected by it. If that is so, then socio-technical systems is indeed a dimension of organizational studies and human resources management analysis of far greater ramification and dimension than it has been hitherto in organizational studies. This requires that classification of technical systems be done with reference to the sector, with reference to the basis of making technical systems as the core, with reference to industrial organizations of size, small batch, mass production, continuous process, and the possibilities of classification are endless. The implication of this for our purposes is to recognize a simple dimension. No classification of technical systems is all pervasive. No classification of technical systems responds to all requirements. No classification of technical systems is beyond questioning. Then the question arises how to go about it, and the way to go about it is to realize that classifications may vary. Classifications are relevant only to the extent that they fulfill an organizational need, and identification of the need therefore is the most important precursor steps before a classification of technical systems can be undertaken. This is what I call looking at technical systems from a managerial perspective for developing their classification. The managerial dimension becomes the determining factor and makes it both a challenge and an extremely satisfying operation if it can be done satisfactorily. But the news, I do not know whether it is good or bad, you do not have a choice, you will have to classify organizations also by technology, and that cannot be as per a pre-described standard formula. Thomson, for example, long linked technology as a factor of involvement with a series of interdependencies between various production units. Now, if you link technology with a situation which involves serial interdependence between various production units, then full automation assembly line is a major revolution. Yes, a way of classifying technology, but to my mind a simplified one, because it narrows down the problem only to the production aspect. You have heard me talk earlier on of the mediating technologies, which involves joining of the clients and the customers, otherwise independent ones also get linked. It is important to realize that technical systems leave an impact upon structures. I would like you to read this slide carefully to understand how the researches of Joanne Woodward were used to understand technical subsystems better, and what is the impact they made upon structures. The message which comes out is clear. The direct correlation between technology and organization structure, according to Joanne Woodward, was established. The consequences was lengthened line of command was increased in vertical levels. The span of control was also increased. Salaries and wages went up. The managers per ratio increased. Staff worker ratio larger. Supervision level higher. So, socio-technical systems, if adopted as the correct perspective of designing and operating an organization, was affecting many factors, 6 of which are limited here. In fact, even the system of production would require a different structure, and that is the real implication of the socio-technical systems for work situations. We will carry the discussion further.